Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp, RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp is a Canadian-based mineral exploration project generator. The company currently holds multiple property interests in Ontario with joint venture partners and is seeking further joint venture partners for other drill-ready properties in our portfolio. For more information, please visit our website at rmroyalty.com or call me at 604-922-2030.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin and the publisher of thebreaker.news. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
Bob, China has called Canada naive if it thinks President Trump saying anything to President Xi about the Huawei situation and the Canadians being held, some people would say illegally in China, would make any difference. Is Canada being naive, or are we just too polite for our own damn good?
Well, definitely Justin Trudeau not taking the bull by the horns and relying on Donald Trump to really spearhead this, I think, is wrong. Trudeau should have been aggressive from day one. From the moment he heard that Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor had been arrested in retaliation for the Meng Wanzhou arrest at Vancouver International Airport, he should have been assertive from day one, and maybe we wouldn't be here in July of 2019 with the unofficial sanctions against Canada by China, that they've stopped buying Canadian meat and they've stopped buying Canadian canola. And there are signs also in the tourism and real estate industries that there's fewer Chinese tourists and fewer Chinese real estate investors, or at least Chinese real estate investors aren't buying like they did in Vancouver the last several years. We're seeing the impacts by China of what happens when you arrest someone of the stature of Meng Wanzhou, who has been called by a nickname in Chinese social media as the Huawei Princess. She really is the most prominent woman in Chinese business, and there really doesn't appear to be any Chinese woman who is her equal in government, because Xi Jinping's inner circle is all men. And this happens at a time, of course, when governments around the world are trying to figure out whether they should use Huawei's technology for the 5G, the fifth generation telecommunications networks. This really is an interesting battle at this time, but the war of words continues. Doesn't seem like much was solved at G20, except Donald Trump did announce that there will be more talks, and that they're not going to add any more tariffs against China in order to keep talking. But when he had his news conference, he said that the Huawei situation did not come up when he talked with Xi Jinping, but could be talked about later down the road when it comes to negotiations. So I think this is just again China being the bully state and using its words carefully and doing whatever it can to try to bully Canada and make fun of Canada, that Canada appears to be the junior partner of the United States instead of asserting its own independence. And this happens again, more than 40 years after Canada opened up diplomatic ties with China, and was actually a bit of a trailblazer among Western governments. And under the previous Trudeau, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, that's what the case was when Mao Zedong was the supreme leader of China. Well, now you've got Justin Trudeau having to deal with Xi Jinping, who is the most powerful leader of China since Mao, and a leader who, like other senior politicians in China, calls Justin Trudeau Xiao Trudeau, little potato, because the word Trudeau sounds like the Chinese word for potato, and they're calling him little potato. That was supposed to be a bit of a nice little nickname when Trudeau was elected in 2015, but since then it's become a bit of a pejorative. The latest headlines out of China are that Michael Kovrig isn't allowed to use his reading glasses in jail, and one of the few things that a prisoner in jail can do to pass the time and keep the mind active, according to other prisoners of China that I've talked to, is to read. And here he has his reading glasses taken away from him. It brings to mind more and more of the soft kind of torture that's happening for these two Canadians who are held in jail in China in retaliation, that they are not allowed to go out and see sunlight, and they're not allowed to have lights off at night when they sleep, and they are subject to hours of interrogation on a daily basis. They can only see a consular official once a month, and they don't get to see their lawyer, don't get to see their family, and they might get a letter from their family, and that's all they get. It's a disgrace that China even has any standing on any United Nations human rights bodies when it treats prisoners in such a fashion, compared to how Canadian prisons, American prisons have much higher standards of treatment of prisoners when they come to people that are alleged to have committed such innocuous crimes. And in this case, the charges are all made up, because China needed some sort of leverage to try to throw back at Canada after Meng Wanzhou was arrested back in December. And that's working its way to the courts. And of course, Meng Wanzhou lives in luxury in Shaughnessy in a mansion just a couple doors down from the United States consulate. And she can come and go as she please, except she does have a curfew from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. daily.
Also, on the China file, the government of China threw a party for BC government officials, and the mayor of Richmond was one of those officials. What's the story there?
Well, the Union of BC Municipalities has a convention every year. It alternates usually between Vancouver and Whistler, and sometimes goes to Victoria. This year's convention in September is in Vancouver. I covered the one in 2017. This is a convention really for local governments and regional districts, for mayors and councillors, and others, in the municipal government mix, including city managers, chief administrators, various senior managers. They all come together, a couple thousand of them, for almost a week once a year, and talk about major trends affecting municipal governments and regional districts, and also First Nations. They get to sit down with cabinet ministers and give the provincial cabinet their wish lists. And they also go to a convention or convention floor where they do interface with trade groups who are hoping to sell things, goods and services to municipal governments. And back in 2012, the People's Republic of China consulate in Vancouver became a sponsor of the UBCM and started to hold a cocktail party where they give away a lot of free food, a lot of free drink. They want to have an audience of mayors and councillors and senior bureaucratic officials, senior bureaucrats from towns and cities and regional districts, and that's also a convention where a lot of provincial cabinet ministers are. So you get a real interesting mix of the provincial and local politicians who go to this reception, where they're fed and they're watered, and they are also subject to a lecture from the Consul General, who says all kinds of nice things about trade and investment ties between China and Canada. And this is unusual because there's no other federal government that does this. China is the only federal government that goes and creates this connection with local government officials, which is unsettling because of what Richard Fadden said in 2010 when he was the head of CSIS, that China was actually doing whatever it could to influence municipal politicians in British Columbia. And here's a case where they're doing it every year. It sounds rather innocuous, that it's just a cocktail party, but this is a cocktail party where the Chinese government essentially uses it as a bit of a propaganda tool, as well as a tool to make connections with those in municipal governments in order to exert influence on them, to do whatever it can to try to soften the image of China. And this has caused a bit of a rift between a bunch of mayors. Brad West, the rookie mayor of Port Coquitlam, who was previously a councillor, who has for a number of years been very concerned about what China is doing to communities in British Columbia, he spoke out about it, wrote a letter to complain to the Union of BC Municipalities, tell them it was not acceptable, that they should cancel the sponsorship arrangement, cancel the cocktail party, not allowing anything like this to happen for a couple of reasons. One is that this is a case of a foreign government lobbying municipal officials. And the other reason why is because that foreign government is China, which is not a democracy. It's basically a dictatorship by one party. It doesn't adhere to human rights standards. It routinely jails lawyers and journalists, and it is a country with so many problems. Right now in Xinjiang, the mostly Muslim province, it's been reported up to 1 million people are in internment camps to try to re-educate them. China thinks that if it re-educates the Muslims in Xinjiang, that there won't be any terrorism. Well, this could be a way to get the Muslims in Xinjiang even angrier. I don't think anyone, regardless of their religion, would be very happy to be rounded up by police and put into a jail and be subject to lecturing for weeks on end. There's also the situation in Tibet that's been much publicized over the years. There's the situation, of course, we talked about earlier with two Canadians, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, in jail in terrible conditions and no justification for the charges against them. There's that case, and of course there's the retaliatory measures that China has made against Canada, which are affecting some British Columbia communities that do have farmers who raise cattle, farmers that raise pork. They're being hit in the pocketbooks by China in this trade war. And why should their mayors be going to this kind of event? So, following on the footsteps of Brad West, the mayor of Delta, George Harvey, and the mayor of Kamloops, Ken Christian, have both said the same thing, that they will not be attending this reception, and they plan to boycott it. They don't like the idea of a foreign government lobbying municipal politicians. Mayor Kennedy Stewart today has come out and said that he will not be going to it. He doesn't find it useful for his time. And he's also someone who said that he had recent meetings with the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government's top Canadian envoy and told that person, he said, that they should do whatever they can to withdraw the extradition bill that is causing so many people in the Hong Kong diaspora such anger because of the worry that civil rights in Hong Kong are being even further eroded in favor of mainland China. You do have a couple other mayors, though. One of them is Malcolm Brody, the mayor of Richmond, who says that he'll go if his schedule permits, and he doesn't see anything wrong with it. He thinks that with his city's large ethnic Chinese community, about 54% in the last census identified as being Chinese, that it's good to communicate, especially when it comes to communication about trade and economic development. So despite the civil rights issues that Malcolm Brody did acknowledge, he thinks it's just fine for him to go and for other mayors and other politicians to go and spend some time at a cocktail reception and hear what the Chinese consulate has to say. He's taking a different tact on it, which I found very interesting. He also tried to do a bit of a spin there and say, well, what's the difference between the Chinese consulate and, say, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, the union that represents Richmond workers, and the union that City of Richmond will be negotiating with on the next contract for union workers. Well, they have a reception at the UBCM convention. They're doing the same thing. They're trying to influence local politicians. So Malcolm Brody tried to tie the two together. I did ask him the question about why he would want to mention China and CUPE in the same sentence. He was very clear, though, that he wasn't comparing the substance of what China is doing at UBCM with the substance of what CUPE is doing at UBCM. He acknowledges that they're in a completely different realm on the policy spectrum, but he said that people are complaining about one group lobbying, they should be consistent and complain about all groups lobbying. And whether that might be a conflict of interest for municipal politicians to be at a cocktail party with the union that's going to be negotiating with them to try to get a better deal for its members. In closing, though, the UBCM convention will have a policy debate, as it normally does, where there will be various motions on the floor, including one from the City of Richmond, to encourage the UBCM to lobby the provincial government to have a province-wide lobbyist registry for all municipalities, which would be a step forward. We do have a lobbyist registry on the provincial scene, but for those who are looking for contracts, for those who are looking to influence the writing of laws on the municipal side of things, there's one small lobbyist registry in Surrey, but that is focused solely on development, and it's not very well enforced. But apart from that, there is no full lobbyist registry for municipalities across the province, and that's something that can be debated and perhaps decided upon at the UBCM convention, and that would then be a policy that would be forwarded to the provincial NDP government for them to decide to possibly add municipalities to the existing provincial lobbyist registry, and it would also have to be an increase in budget to the lobbyist registrar in order to take on the task of regulating municipalities when it comes to lobbying.
Well, shouldn't a federal body like CSIS step in and say, isn't this equivalent to spying? You're trying to influence Canadian government?
It would be worthy for CSIS to do so, but CSIS and Canadian Security Establishment have already published reports that have already pointed to China exerting influence on subnational governments, on provincial governments, on municipal governments. There are also people like Jonathan Manthorpe in his book, The Claws of the Panda. There's also Clive Hamilton, author and professor down in Australia, who I featured in a podcast on the Breaker.News podcast. Journalists have delved deep and found the evidence that in Canadian jurisdictions and Australian jurisdictions that this is part of the program. It's called United Front. The United Front Work Department is an actual office of the Communist Party of China, and that's their job, is to influence foreign governments and influence the Chinese diaspora in Canada, in Australia, and other countries. His job is to lobby, and they really should be registered, and maybe it would be smart for the federal authorities to get a little bit more active in warning subnational authorities, but there's also people in the UBCM itself and other bigger municipal governments in British Columbia whose job is to do intergovernmental affairs. They're the ones who should be liaising with the provincial officials, liaising with the federal officials, not just on economic development, but they should be talking to them on so many other realms that these people seem to be just asleep at the switch, that they don't understand what's happening. They just see it for what they see it as, which is just a cocktail party, but it's a cocktail party with a goal to put forward the policy and plant a seed in the minds of those who attend. When I attended in 2017, the big policy that the Chinese government was pushing at the time was the Belt and Road program, which is the massive infrastructure building and investment program under Xi Jinping around vast parts of the world. The Belt and Road program is active, building major infrastructure in Africa, Southeast Asia, in parts of Europe. This is a massive building program to create what China likes to call the new Silk Road, new trade routes between some of the world's most populous areas and some of the world's most resource-rich areas with China. They're building seaports, airports, highways, bridges, you name it. It's a multi-trillion-dollar program, and there's already been some complaints about that in Africa, where some African countries are on the hook for some of the cost. So the Belt and Road program is a major effort by Xi Jinping to make sure all roads, when it comes to trade, lead to China. And with that, it's a way for China to gain even more economic and political clout on other countries in the world. So that's what they were trying to push in 2017. I'm not sure what they'd try to push in 2019, but the Chinese government certainly is a focus of concern right now, and that timing of the UBCM convention in September is also very interesting, because that's within 1 month, within about 30 days of the federal election. And this federal election expects China and relations with China to be a very, very big issue. It was all but ignored last time. Remember, they even had a leaders' debate about foreign policy, and China was not on the agenda.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after the break.
Mackin Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Mackin's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at mackinresources.com.
Grand Portage Resources' Herbert Gold Project in southeast Alaska highlights increased gold resource, indicated and inferred, of 860,000 ounces, in excess of 10 grams per ton gold. Expansion drilling is planned on the Herbert Gold property for the summer of 2019. Grand Portage Resources trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTCQB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, what's the latest with the BC Lottery Corporation and the sudden exodus of executives from its head offices?
Well, I got a tip from a reader on Tuesday afternoon, July 2nd. In mid-afternoon, a memo went out inside BC Lottery Corporation announcing that Rob Croker had departed. Rob Croker, who was the vice president of compliance and security, the guy who is in charge of making sure no money laundering happens in casinos, and making sure that BC Lottery Corporation and all of its staff and all of its partners, including the casino operators, follow the law. And so suddenly he was gone. Last week he actually was registered to appear at an anti-corruption convention by a group called Trace International, which is based near Washington, D.C., a bribery and economic crime summit last week, and one of the two people there from BC Lottery Corporation was Rob Croker. Rob Croker, who before working at BC Lottery Corporation was actually working at River Rock for Great Canadian Gaming as their head of security. He had come from a regulatory background in the provincial government on several files. He had previously been an RCMP officer many years ago. And in recent years, though, he was under fire because of all of the headlines about casinos in British Columbia being used for money laundering by whale gamblers from Asia who were connected to the illicit drug trade and also connected to the real estate trade. While he was working at River Rock back before he joined BCLC in 2015, Rob Croker told Business in Vancouver that it would be impossible to launder money at River Rock. He's also someone who had been appointed while working at Great Canadian to be on the board of the Justice Institute, which is the body which, among other things, trains police officers here in British Columbia. And up until last fall, he'd actually been the chair of the Justice Institute. Even after Peter German's first dirty money report, Rob Croker, the BC Lottery Corporation security head, remained as the chairman of the Justice Institute, and CTV took a hardline investigation on that, and eventually Rob Croker was forced to quit. Well, he was still with BC Lottery Corporation last week when the first anniversary of Peter German's first report passed. And after the holiday weekend, he was gone. Now, I don't know if he went on his own or if he was asked to leave. BC Lottery Corporation isn't commenting one way or another. They're not confirming or denying that he was fired, but they're also not telling me when he gave his notice of departure, if he gave his notice of departure. All they told me was that to look out for the Statement of Financial Information, which is released annually, which has information about severance payments. He was among several BC Lottery Corporation senior executives who were making around $240,000 a year. And he was actually not the only one to have departed in recent months. Seems to have been a bit of a parade from the executive suites at the BC Lottery Corporation since last November. Susan Dolinsky, the Vice President of Communications, she suddenly left last November. Monica Bohm, who was in charge of e-gaming, she left in May. So that's three right there who suddenly up and departed. Amanda Hobson is also going. Now, she's the Chief Financial Officer. At the end of April, BCLC announced that she'd be going to a position of Vice President of Finance and Investor Relations with Finning. She was paid $256,000 during the last fiscal year. She's still listed on the website, but she's also going. They issued a news release when Amanda Hobson's departure was announced, and Jim Lightbody, the chief executive officer, said all kinds of nice things about her, but Bohm and Dolinsky didn't get the same treatment. Croker, when I started making phone calls yesterday to BCLC, they threw together a news release, and they thanked him for his service, but no glowing quotes from Jim Lightbody. So a bit of a mystery why it's taken so long for some of these people to leave, especially Rob Croker after the Peter German report, and questions still persist of why Jim Lightbody remains as CEO and why Brad Demaris remains as Vice President of Casinos. Demaris will be taking over, at least on the interim basis, all of Croker's files. Demaris was actually the Vice President of Security at BCLC before Croker was hired. Demaris had a long career both in the Vancouver Police and with the RCMP. Again, some serious questions about the executives at BC Lottery Corporation, but this seems to be some signs that the new board that the NDP appointed, starting more than a year ago, that the new board the NDP appointed is bringing some new ideas to the table and taking a serious look at those who are in the executive suite at BCLC.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after the break.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp, MGI on the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected several high-grade gold intersections, including 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. Additional drill targets on the LH property have been identified by a 2018 drone airborne magnetic survey to further evaluate a pyrrhotite-enriched gold-bearing system. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, is there another case before the courts involving the foreign buyer tax in BC?
Yeah, the foreign buyer tax, which was brought in back in 2016 by the BC Liberals, and the NDP kept it and increased it. It has caused some real estate investors to find unusual ways perhaps to make their investments, but also when they get those tax bills, they've hired lawyers to appeal it. And in one case, there's a petition to the BC Supreme Court by a fellow named Guozhang Wang, who immigrated to Canada from China with his family in 2010, someone with a lumber business, and I've written about this on the Breaker.news, had loaned money to his in-laws in China for them to purchase his lumber business, and gave them a no-interest loan, and basically said, pay me back when you can, when you got the money. They eventually started paying him back the money. And then he started buying houses. He bought 4 West Side properties in 2011 and got revenue out of them by renting them out, but then sold them in 2013 and 2014. And in 2016, he decided to buy a house in Vancouver, 5500 Churchill Street. The house was listed for $8.6 million. He was looking for a lender for about half that, for about $1 million. So he's looking for a mortgage for half the value of the purchase value of the house. And a mortgage broker from CIBC suggested, because he couldn't get the mortgage as it was, for him to find a guarantor. So this Guozhang Wang asked one of the two in-laws who bought his lumber business if they wanted to become a 1% title holder, on the purchase to add to the purchase contract, and one of them did. So he paid the foreign buyer tax on the 1% interest of that was owned foreign. His in-law from China, who'd only been to Vancouver passing through on to change flights at the airport, but never really visited Vancouver. But lo and behold, there was an assessment of more than $1.5 million on this Churchill Street house. And of that, about $1.28 million was the actual foreign buyer's tax, the additional foreign buyer's tax. So this foreign, this person who now lives in Canada, has owned houses here, who basically got someone on the deed as a 1%, 1% owner, is now trying to deal with the tax authorities, the provincial government, because the government is arguing that this 1% owner or 1% shareholder in the property actually has a beneficial ownership interest in the property, and therefore should be paying the fair share. And the petition to the court says that the in-laws don't have any involvement in real estate in China or in Canada, never visited Canada except for a transitory stay at the airport, just changing flights. And the only reason why one of the in-laws is on the title is because he's a guarantor for the petitioner's mortgage, and that was suggested by the bank. So the property now is worth $11.8 million, but there's this rather large $1.53 million tax bill that has to be solved. It's another case of the foreign buyer's tax ending up in the courts, and for a judge to decide whether the person should be paying for it.
Well, logically, you'd think they'd owe 1%, 20% on that 1% they own, not whatever it was, 1.35 million.
Well, I think the government is wondering, well, who really is owning this property, and how was it really financed? This would be so much easier, for instance, if if the owner of this property had a guarantor who was from the United States or from United Kingdom, where our banks are working with their banks, and it's much easier to get information, and transparency and accountability are there because our governments work together with them, and there's so many different treaties of information sharing, and some of the banks are the same across the border as they are here. When it comes to China, it's a little more opaque just because of the way it is. So it'll be interesting to see if this gets into courts and what the arguments will be, and what the examination for discovery will be like, what the provincial government will be able to learn more about the business relationships of Guozhang Wang. It's very possible that the petition is just the way it is, that there may be just more evidence suggesting that it is as the homeowner says it was. It could also be that this deal could be a lot more complex than it's being presented, and that the government may be able to extract more information out of both the homeowner as well as the title holder. And this is an interesting one because that 1% title holder, you'd think, may be forced to testify about what she knows about the business relationship. This could be a bit of a complex case, and we'll see what comes of it, and whether who will get the judge's decision either way.
Well, also, the foreign buyer tax just covers buyers. It doesn't say who can provide a mortgage. And I've heard one way around the tax is foreign money is used to supply the mortgage. The homeowner defaults on the mortgage, and then the mortgage lender gets to take over the house.
Well, yeah, there have been other cases of this, that the 1% title holder, the 1% shareholder, has been seen as a bit of a trick to get around that as well. This is supposed to be solved again by the new beneficial ownership registry that'll be set up and it's supposed to be running next year. So we'll be able to know who really owns the property, and opaque deals won't be able to happen at all, or they'll be detected by those who are entrusted to investigate this. So, I think the government is looking at this and saying, 1% title holder, was the deal done here properly in Canada, or was the deal done overseas? And they want to look behind the veil and see how this is actually structured, and see if indeed this person really just has a 1% share, and see what the role was of CIBC, or if something else is going on in order to get around paying the tax.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been Bob Mackin, an award-winning investigative reporter and the publisher of TheBreaker.News, his website, TheBreaker.ca. If you have any questions for Bob or for any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.